Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Octopus 101. This is for the Australian APAC / New Zealand audience. My name is John Bristowe. I'm the Community Director for Octopus Deploy. Thank you for your time and attention joining us today. This is a bit of a new format for us. What we've decided to do is host 3 independent Octopus 101 sessions from now on for different audiences around the world. The reason why is because a lot of people were telling us, I can't attend a webinar at 2 a.m. So we've decided to now make 3 versions of it, one for the APAC region or the Asia Pacific region, one for the region in the Americas, and then one for the folks over in Europe. So welcome. Thank you for your time and attention. This is, as I said, Octopus 101, and the whole purpose of this is to basically provide you a loose or fast and loose sort of summary of what is Octopus Deploy, how it works, why you might want to use it. This is a great opportunity for you to ask your questions. This is a live webinar, so feel free to ask questions in the comment section, wherever you're joining us from, in social, through StreamYard, etc. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. As I said, this is going to be a very sort of fast, but also informative and fun, demo-heavy primer, I guess, to Octopus. That's why we're calling it the 101 series, so there you go. For those who don't know me, my name is John Bristowe. If you need to reach me, I'm available at this email address there. You should be able to find me, no problem. It'd be great to chat with you. We're going to be taking a look at Octopus today. So if you want to find out more about us, you can go to this website, which is octopus.com. There you'll see a website that looks like this. If you have any, if you want to kick the tires, if you want to see what a demo is like, you can go there and check it out, which is great. But again, if you need to reach me, you can reach me at this email address. Love to hear from you if you have any questions. So what we're going to learn in this webinar, what we're going to talk about in this webinar. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about how Octopus works, and more importantly, we're going to talk about why you should use it. Oftentimes, when we take a look at technologies, uh, there's a lot of how-to, there's a lot of what it is, but it's kind of hard to figure out why it is that you want to use this technology. And so we're going to address that directly in this webinar. And so my hope is that at the end of this webinar, you'll have a very clear understanding as to why you might want to use Octopus Deploy. The second thing we're going to look at is Octopus fundamentals. So we're going to talk a lot about fundamentals like processes, deployment processes, projects, releases, etc. These are sort of the sort of taxonomy that we have for Octopus Deploy itself. This is how we describe things in Octopus Deploy. And by understanding these things, you'll have a solid understanding of how to apply them. Then we'll take a look at how to create a deployment process both from scratch, and we'll take a look at some more complicated deployment processes just to give you a taste of what you can do with the product. And then finally, we'll round things up by showing you how you can trigger a deployment using a CI process or a continuous integration process, either that or a product like a server, which is there are many out there. There's GitHub Actions, there's TeamCity, there's Jenkins. You name a CI product, I'm sure we've seen it. So we'll show you how to trigger a deployment via those means. Awesome. So let's start by talking a little bit about the story around deployments. Everyone's favorite topic, right? So deployments are generally seen as a pretty easy sort of scenario for simple scenarios. That is, on the left, you have your app. On the right, we have the folks that we're trying to get our software into the hands of. We're the happy DevOps engineer. Notice that we have a smile on our face with a happy DevOps engineer. And we are employing one or many deployment scripts to basically get software into the hands of customers. Customers may be running against production builds. They may have access to some staging builds if they're an internal customer, for example. But generally speaking, this is the state of the world as it exists today. Now, as you may know, software is complex and it increases in complexity, and deployments are no different. So as our application evolves, our scenarios get a little bit more complex. So we have different versions of our application that are now being built. We also have different types of customers who may want to run those different versions of our software. So we may have different deployment targets. We may have targets that run in, say, Kubernetes clusters. We may have stuff that's running on premise. We may have stuff that's running in the cloud. And we may be shipping different versions or tenants of, or targeting different tenants for versions of our software. And so this is where things get a little bit more interesting, so to speak. And you may notice that we've lost a smile now. The DevOps engineer is no longer smiling. The DevOps engineer or ourselves is now looking a little bit unhappy. And of course, this continues to, the scenario doesn't get any simpler. It continues to get more complex. And so, as we go through this process, you'll see like why there's a need for deployments. And so we may have different deployment targets. We may have different deployment scenarios that we have to think about. We may have new environments, not just production, but also staging, development, test, etc. And so as you can see, it starts to get really, really complex. And so it gets harder as we grow and as we scale. And so what we like to think of is like Octopus Deploy makes these complex deployments really, really easy. And so deployment is now managed by Octopus. You can consider it as the source of truth. It is that single pane of glass that you can use for all your deployment automation. And as a result, it allows you to manage all your enterprise deployment processes with consistency and also compliance. That's a big one for us, which is compliance. We want to make sure that everything is traceable, auditable, etc. We want to make sure all those things are part of that process. And so as you take a look at a holistic view of Octopus and where it kind of fits, you'll see it like that same sort of scenario where we have customers on the left, or sorry, we have our users on the left, our developers, building out code, shipping out through CI processes or servers, and then hitting a bunch of targets on the right-hand side. And that's really where Octopus shines. Octopus is designed, built, and purposed for getting software into the hands of your customers, no matter where that customer may be. And you can think of the scenario as a different way of describing this is, with or without Octopus. So without Octopus, obviously, you've got a variety of deployment scripts, you've got a variety of packages, everything kind of going in its different direction. With Octopus Deploy, you've got a little bit more sanity as part of the process. And of course, this also applies to other scenarios as well. So if we take a look at scenarios where Perhaps if you're utilizing GitHub, a very common sort of platform for a lot of developers, you may want to utilize GitHub Copilot. That is a scenario that we support. We actually have Copilot support built in through GitHub Copilot. That integration also extends to GitHub Apps, GitHub Actions, etc. And so really you can utilize technologies or solutions like GitHub very, very well in concert with Octopus Deploy. And of course, targeting all the sorts of scenarios that you want to target, whether that's in the cloud or on-premise. We support all of them. And of course, this can also be applied to other scenarios as well. Scenarios where you have to integrate different types of CI solutions. You may want to pull packages from different locations. You may also want to employ different deployment strategies. So rolling deployments, blue-green deployments, canary deployments, etc. These and other sorts of scenarios we support as part of Octopus. All right, so without any further ado, I think it might be good for us to take a look at a demo. So for that, let me go ahead and switch over to my environment here. So what you see here is the dashboard for Octopus itself. So when you create an instance or a trial, you can sign up for a trial here free. It's a 30-day no obligation trial. You can sign up for an instance of Octopus Cloud. You can also install it locally on your own infrastructure if you wish. But here is an instance of Octopus Cloud. You can see on the left-hand side, I have a variety of categories here. In the center here is my dashboard. This is where I see not only my projects. So projects you can think of as like an individual part or piece of an application. It really defines like how you think about deployments. And then I have my environments like development, staging, production, etc. In addition to that, here I can get a quick at-a-glance sense of when these versions of this project have gone out to these environments here. So with Octopus, I get a one-stop shop for everything that I want to see in terms of where my projects are deployed and what versions and when they were deployed. So I can do this and I can work in this environment, but what I'd like to do is actually take a step back and show you what it looks like from a first run experience. So I'm going to create what's called a space. Now a space is nothing more than just a sort of a isolation boundary. It's a way you can separate different projects from one another. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new space here called Octopus 101. I'm going to assign myself as a manager, and let's jump into this space now and see what the first run experience is like, just to show you kind of what this is all about. So we spend a lot of time here really focusing on the first run experience. We want folks to feel like, you know, we're going to help you through this process. And so notice here we provide you with video support and docs, but we also give you some getting started guides. We really care about what that first run experience looks like. So let's go ahead and click on Get Started, and let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing here. So the first run experience for creating a new project, you'll give a project a name. So, you know, good demo world example here. Hello, Octopus. Now, the second question here is going to ask me, where do I want to store my project process settings and non-sensitive variables? So I can store them in the Octopus database, or if I so choose, I can store those in a Git repository. So I can underpin everything that I'm doing in terms of this project in Git. And the reason why I may want to do this is because it gives me a better option for changing those values later on. So if I want to update values, development processes through text, I'll have the option to do that. But for this option here, I'm just going to assume the default, which is the Octopus database itself. We also have these templates here that we can use for environments, like where do we want to deploy to. This is in the case where we're actually utilizing these in concert with different types of application targets. So let's just keep the defaults here, and we'll create a project. The next question it's going to ask me is, what environments do you wish to deploy to? Now, deployments that are targeting different environments, and environments can group together a wide variety of deployment targets or machines. But these are basically names that you give to the types of ways in which you think of deploying environments. In environments and environment progression is a first-class feature of Octopus Deploy. This is something you won't see in a lot of CI products that try to add deployment after the fact. So with this, we have the ability of being able to do environment progression very easily. Under this all is pinning a deployment pipeline, which we call a lifecycle. So I'll create these environments. And now that I've created this, we'll now be kicked into the process editor. So the process editor is where we define our deployments. So deployments are categorized as a collection of steps. So if you think about it, a collection of steps is really just what are the things that I'm going to do one after the other or in parallel that defines the deployment. So one example might be I provision a database, I make sure latest updates are done, I stand up the database deployment instance, a web site deployment instance, maybe an IS or Tomcat or Apache. I push bits there, a package, what we call a package, and then I stand up the web server instance, and then maybe I send a note to the development team on Slack or Teams that, hey, the deployment is successful. You can check out the instance running here. All of that you can define through a series of steps in the process editor experience. Now, just as a sort of thing to mention here, if I had chosen to underpin this with Git, everything that I'm doing here would be written to Git, and you would see branch support integrated here as well. But let's take a look at some of the steps that you have available to you through Octopus. These are some of the built-in steps that we have. So we categorize these here based on the categories that they fall under. Notice that we have ones here for cloud native or cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. If I want, I can also run scripts. This is sort of like, let me take the wheel and drive sort of approach. I can do things with packages, so I can deploy directly to servers. I can deploy to infrastructure. We have integration with Kubernetes. We have integration with Docker. We also have a whole slew of community steps that have been written. So if you find that the steps that we have available in Octopus Deploy don't satisfy or meet the requirements you have for doing a deployment, chances are there's one of over 500 community steps that have been written by the community that might satisfy that requirement. So we have community steps here for doing all sorts of things, including integration with things like HashiCorp Vault or Flyway for database migrations. Maybe you're into Firebase or you're doing integration with Datadog or Azure DevOps. For whatever reason, these and other sorts of steps you can use as part of a step in your deployment process. So let's go ahead and let's start defining our deployment process as part of this environment here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just use our most popular step, which is run a script. So run a script, incidentally, is most popular for a variety of reasons. Like, folks like to basically run the show themselves, which is fine. And notice here, when I've added that step, it shows up in this well here. So what I see here is the first step of my deployment process. Now, don't be too daunted by what you're seeing here. Yes, there's a lot of knobs and buttons and whistles, if you will, to this deployment step. But really, these are ways in which we control how the step runs. So every step that you have in the deployment process will have configuration options for things like what conditions does the step run under, how is the step configured, etc. Generally speaking, though, once you get a hang of how these things look, you'll breeze right through this really quickly. So this is a script step, run a script step. So what this does, it allows me to define where the script is defined. So this is I'm defining a deployment process here, and I'm running a piece of code in a sense. And so that code can come from a variety of locations. It can be defined either inline, it can come from a Git repository, or it can be embedded as part of a package like a zip archive that I've uploaded to some location, whether it's our own zip repository or our own repository, or a variety of other repositories as well. We can define additional repositories for archives as feeds, and then you can use those feeds to pull down packages from them. So we support things like Artifactory or Helm or OCI registries, etc. You can define those if you so wish. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, I want to define an inline script here. And so this is the first step in my deployment process. I want to go ahead and run some script. And now I can utilize a variety of built-in languages. For example, I can utilize PowerShell, I can utilize Bash. I can also utilize a wide variety of built-in variables. So if I wanted to, I could utilize variables that would allow me to basically inject or add values here. And this turns out to be really powerful because when you do this, you're basically saying, like, these values may change over time. And the reason why this is important is because obviously you want to make sure that your deployments are consistent, and not only consistent for an execution, but also for environment promotion. So these values you can certainly inject as part of this. Now, because I'm utilizing PowerShell, we'll do the sort of canonical, write host and say, hello, Octopus. But basically what I'm doing here is I'm just executing some code in line. I could also define a bunch of other things as well if I wanted to. I can define things like target tags, which is where I want the things to run, et cetera, et cetera. I can also define conditions. So conditions might be things like, you know, what environments do I want this to run? What conditions are associated with this run step? So I want this to always run, or I want it to only run when the previous step was successful, et cetera. These and other sorts of conditions you can define. And we'll talk a little bit about these conditions in a sec. In addition to that, we do validation against the steps themselves. So if I were to go ahead and click save here, you'll notice that we get a violation. So it says I need to define one or more target tags to run a script step to apply a run. So what this is basically doing is it's telling me, hey, you've got to define a target tag. A target tag allows me to define a tag that I associate with a deployment target. So in this case, it's just giving me an example like hello Octopus targets. But these and other sorts of things I can define. And when I go ahead and cloud save this, you'll notice that it also does a provisional check here. This is a warning. It's not an error, but it's telling me like, hey, you have one target tag that isn't assigned to any deployment targets. So that may be an issue. Now, that's not necessarily an issue for our case, but it is something that, may need to be raised. And I'll go in here and I can define what are called deployment targets. So deployment targets are where you basically represent a lot of the infrastructure you're going to deploy to. So I can define and add a deployment target here. Notice that we categorize these accordingly. So we have our built-in agents for Kubernetes, or for we have a facility for adding agents for Linux, Windows, and Mac. We call this a tentacle. So tentacle is the sort of name, the marketing name that we've given to it. And there are two types of tentacles. There's a listening tentacle and a polling tentacle. And the reason why there's different types of tentacles is because oftentimes there might be scenarios where you cannot pierce the firewall of your infrastructure. And so a polling tentacle will do just that. It will poll periodically to saying, hey, do you have work? Hey, do you have work, etc. Whereas a listening tentacle will have a provisioned location that I can address and talk to. And then I can go ahead and send commands to. I can also connect via SSH if I so wish as well. So you'll notice that these options are available for a variety of categories. I can also deploy to a variety of cloud locations, etc. For this example here, I'm just going to add a cloud region. And the reason why I'm doing that is because it's just a provision that we provide as part of Octopus Cloud. And I can give it a variety of target tags. And I'll just give this a name, hello Octopus, for example, as a target tag. I can also define a worker pool here. A worker pool is basically how we provision these things for you to utilize going forward. So I've defined a deployment target here. Now, coming back to my deployment, you can see that if I want to, I can now continue the deployment here and then execute and run this. So let's go ahead and do that. So we have our deployment process here. I could add additional steps to this if I so choose. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called create a release. So create a release, what this does is it creates for me a snapshot. A snapshot is really important because what it does is it basically captures all the information that went into the release. And the reason why you do that is because you want releases to be consistent across time and across environments. And so by creating a snapshot, which includes everything that went into that release itself, what that allows you to do is it facilitates things like rollbacks. It allows you to do environment progression, etc. So I can define here a version. I can also use semantic versioning if I so wish. I can also use an I to auto increment the version number if I so choose. I can add release notes here. Release notes can come from your build information if you so wish. So this can be things like commits, etc. And so when I click on save, it will then have all of that information that I went into defining the release persisted here. So here it's telling me I'm going to utilize deployment first, development here for my first deployment. There are no packages associated with any steps, which is fine. But if I had zip archives or other types of packages that I wanted to integrate as part of this, I could use that. If there are any associated Git resources or variables, it would show them here. So those variables that I showed you earlier, I could certainly use if I wanted to. Any artifacts as well would be listed here, and then a deployment history. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is we want to make sure that everything that we're doing here is auditable and traceable back to what actually occurred. So I can now choose to opt to deployment, do a deployment to a variety of different environments, or I can just simply say, yes, I want to deploy to development. I can also specify things like a schedule. So I can say I want to do it now or later. I can give it a priority. Notice that this is an early access feature. So this is allowing you to basically give priority to tasks. And this is useful if you have lots of teams doing Octopus deployments. This is really useful in those scenarios. In addition to that, I can also specify as part of the release, hey, that I don't want to run a script step. I want to, or maybe if I have 10 steps here, I can opt out of certain steps. I can exclude steps as part of this deployment. We also have a capability here called failure mode, which basically allows you to find what to do when a deployment error occurs, which does happen. So, for a variety of reasons, network latency, network resilience, servers go down, etc., stuff that is beyond the control of Octopus may occur. And so, a guided failure mode is one where you can actually during the deployment, Octopus will pause and allow you to correct any behavior that is reminiscent of an error during a deployment. So we can then click on deploy to do a deployment, and away it goes, and it does a deployment here as part of this. So we're running a script in which it may skip as part of this, but you'll see that we get the welcome message here as part of this. So the reason why we skipped this is just because it didn't find a deployment target matching that tag. I couldn't remember what the tag was, but in here you'll see there's a whole summary of steps that we've occurred here that we can trace, and we can see who did what and when. If I had build information integrated here, I could see that too, but we don't have any build information. But I just wanted to show you what that process looks like from that perspective. So that's giving you a sense of how you might define a deployment. Now, the reason why this is useful is because once you define this, you'll see it listed as part of your dashboard. You'll have a sense of where that deployment lives. You'll also have some sanity around your deployments going forward, because then you can do promotion to new environments if you wish, or you can do things like rollbacks. You can do a variety of deployment patterns as well if you so wish. So these and other options are available to you. So that is a very, very high level, sort of loose description of how Octopus, or seeing how Octopus works as part of this. So jumping back to our slides here, just going to give you a sense of what you've seen. So as you saw before, we've defined a deployment process. These deployment processes can get quite complex. So you'll see typically in a more mature environment where Octopus has been used for a while, you'll see deployment processes that span multiple steps. Some of the deployment processes may also run concurrently. So out of the box for Octopus itself, we support a variety of options, including the fact that you can visually represent the deployment process. Not only that, but also represent the conditions and child steps that run. If this was underpinned with Git, you would see all those changes in text. So you could update them directly, and we would synchronize those automatically. We integrate with Markdown. This is good for a team environment where you want to share what these steps do. We also, as I said before, allow you to do parallel step execution, so you can see these steps run. And in addition to that, we also have what are called environment labels. Now, environment labels are really useful because it allows you basically to say, look, I want these steps to only run for these environments. And a good scenario for that might be, in a testing environment, I may want to do extra checks, or in a staging environment, I may want to send out notifications to teams to let them know, like, hey, we're going to staging, we're getting close to go to production. So these and other sorts of things I can specify on an environment basis. Awesome. So what I'd like to do now is just talk a little bit about some of the other capabilities, or round out some of the capabilities that we have built into Octopus. And this helps to define why you might use a deployment tool like Octopus. So first and foremost, one of the reasons why is we want to provide an environment that provides you with very reliable, almost risk-free deployments with additional capabilities for things like rollbacks and deployment patterns. And the reason why this is really, really important is because as you probably have experienced, or maybe have seen in your own environments, your own teams, deployments can get really, really tricky after a while, especially as they evolve, which always happens. In addition to that, Octopus also has a capability for doing release management. So release management and ops can utilize the same tool and execute a series of what are called runbooks. Runbooks are sort of akin to deployment processes. They're a series of steps, but they're more in line with doing operations, things like updating databases, performing maintenance tasks, etc. Some examples here mean like restart a website. These and other types of routine or emergency tasks you may want to run. In addition to that, by defining these runbooks ahead of time, you give and then assigning permission to run those runbooks on behalf of admins you no longer now have to share credentials. You can actually provision these runbooks and set them up ahead of time, and then give, say, your junior or intermediate DBA, web admin, etc., rights to perform those operations because they've been predefined ahead of time, and so there's no permission sharing or there's no credential sharing. So you don't have to use that if you don't. If you're looking for that, it's a capability that's available to you. Other capabilities, of course, includes the fact that as part of this process, we also support integration with containers. So if you're utilizing Docker or utilizing Kubernetes, this is a capability built out of the box that we support. We have integration with Helm, which is awesome. And we also have our own Helm chart for configuring Octopus to run inside a Kubernetes cluster if you so wish. And of course, all of this is deeply supported within the UI. And then a really powerful capability that we have support for is for what's called multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy is the idea that, I may have different versions of my application I want to run for different types of customers. A good example of this might be, let's say I'm running a website and I want different types of, or different instances of that website to target different types of customers. We can do that based on a variety of criteria, but you define those as what are called tenants. And tenants are basically different types of customers that you may have as part of your usage pattern. Another example that we cite here, let's say you're running a veterinary clinic and you want to deploy different versions of that clinic software across different geos. This is something that you can define easily within tenants, and we surface that out through the product itself in a capability called multi-tenancy, which is something you can certainly do. And of course, in addition to that, we also have support for risk and compliance throughout the product. Now, I'll show you a little bit about this in the next demo, but out of the box, we support products like Jira Service Management or ServiceNow. You can actually have ServiceNow act as an arbiter for deployments. So, you can set it up so that ServiceNow will only do a deployment if you get a change request to do so. So it gives approval to do a deployment, and then Octopus will then follow that guidance from ServiceNow to do a deployment, for example. We also have integration with tools like Sumo and also with Splunk. This allows you to basically not utilize the built-in audit trail within Octopus, but offload that to something that probably has a better query engine, for example, or is built exactly for that purpose. So these and other types of integrations we have support for, which allows you to have better assurance going forward if you're wanting to use one of those tools as part of this process. All right, let's take a look at another demo. All right, so for that, I'm just gonna jump into, let's go into this instance here. So this is a different instance that I have running, shows some other examples here. And by the way, if you have any questions at all, feel free to ask them in the comments pane. I'm happy to answer any questions you have here. Just by example, I wanna just make sure that people know that we're doing this live. So just taking a look at we've got some folks here. We've got Tracy from the Cayman Islands. Welcome, 7 p.m. Wow, that's awesome. We got Oklahoma in house, which is great. Awesome to see you. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm happy to answer them here live if you so wish. Awesome. So let's take a look at back here at the demo. You can see we have some of the features that I mentioned earlier. So things like tenants, for example, if I wanted to, I could define a whole bunch of tenants. Notice that our tenants have tags associated with them. What this allows me to do is essentially I can give these tags associated and then drive deployments based on these tags. Tenants have a variety of environments that they run against. So here I have a tenant called _internal that is running against 3 environments. I have other tenants that run against different environments. And this sort of classification or setup of infrastructure allows me to define these things quite nicely because it allows me to do deployments to these very simply. If I wanted to take a look at some of the projects that I have here, so taking a look at an example here, this might be an example worth looking at. So you can see this is a project that is underpinned by Git. So I mentioned before that you can underpin these with Git. This Git repository is located up on GitHub, and you'll notice that we're seeing the Git symbol here. That is telling me that the database for this is writing to Git, and so I can make changes accordingly in Git if I wanted to through pull requests, etc. So here, if I define my process, you'll notice that we have a little bit more of an elaborate process. These are the branches here, so I can see my branches here. Because it's underpinned by Git, I can also see based on tags, etc. So here we have a few steps worth noting. So first step we have here is what's called a manual intervention. A manual intervention is, it kind of sounds like what it is. It's basically Octopus will halt execution of the deployment and wait for a human to come along to either approve it or deny the deployment. So it's kind of like a gate in a sense, manual intervention. It allows you to control very quickly when deployments go through. And you don't have to have a manual intervention in the first step. You could have it as the last step if you wanted to. I don't know why, but you may want to have it as the last step. We can also run things like scripts here. So here we're running a PowerShell script to update a database, for example. These and other sorts of things I can do. We're executing here a YAML against a Kubernetes cluster. So you can see we're defining our YAML inline here if we want. And you can see, I mentioned earlier, all those knobs and buttons that go into steps. You can see there's lots and lots of parts and pieces that are particular to the step type itself. So in this case, this is a deploy Kubernetes YAML step. And the reason why you're seeing a lot of stuff that's particular to that is because that's exactly what we're doing. We're targeting a Kubernetes cluster. And as a result, we want to define things like namespaces. We want to give it either whether we want to enable object status checks, etc. An object status check allows us to see the status of various objects, the pods, the services that are in our deployment target for Kubernetes. So we can certainly see that if we so wish. And by taking a look at releases here, for example, you can see here are the releases that we've had, etc. If we take a look at a release, for example, you can see we've gone ahead and done our deployment here already to development and test. You can see the integrated packages that we've already had as part of this, and we can see the deployment history that we've had as part of this deployment if we wanted to see those as part of the execution. By drilling into the task here, you'll see some of the audit trail here for what a deployment looks like. So you can see all the steps completed successfully. You can see our task log. We get a breakdown here of what actually occurred. If I wanted to, I can increase the verbosity of each step and get a breakdown here of the audit trail that is occurring. I can also take a look at the history of here, who did what and when. So what triggered this, where it was triggered, etc. These and other capabilities are built in out of the box with Octopus, which gives you a lot of capability going forward. Looking at another example here, this is our samples instance here. This is at samples.octopus.app, which you can take a look at yourself. We have a variety of patterns that are integrated in here. So here are all the spaces that we have built in that allow me to define different usage patterns. We can see things like rollbacks. We can things like canary deployments, blue-green, etc. I can also take a look at something like, for example, if I'm applying deployments to Kubernetes, I can take a look at here a variety of different targets. So whether I'm doing cluster integration with AWS, Azure, GCP, etc. I can take a look at one of these instances here, such as a deployment via Customize, which allows me to do better integration with variables for Kubernetes-based deployments. And I can see a similar drill down here on all that's happening. In addition to that, we also have a capability here for insights. So I can create insight reports here if I so wish. I don't have any created here for my Kubernetes deployments, but if I scroll down here, I can take a look at maybe one that has a little bit more innovation. Let's take a look at possibly this one here might have insights. No, it does not. That's okay. Take a look at this one here. So we have a different instance here. I just wanted to show you. So insights are based on DORA metrics. DORA metrics are like mean time to recovery, etc. There's a classification of 4 metrics here. And you can see based on of these, you can see these charts and graphs that are automatically generated for you. This gives you a sense of the velocity that you have of your deployments. So you can see things like your deployment history, or your frequency rather, the lead time to a deployment, whether this is going up and to the right or down and to the left, a stability, your failure rate of deployments, and then your mean time to recovery, how long it takes you to recover from a failure, for example. So if a service goes down, etc., you can take a look at these. And you can also break down each one of these into its own chart and graph. And this is built out of the box through the insights capability we have in Octopus. Looking a little bit more extensively at what you can do with integration with a CI process, I'm going to jump over here into GitHub. Sorry for the context switch. I know that's a little bit jarring. But what we have here is a simple YAML file that defines a GitHub workflow. So workflows are defined as part of YAML in GitHub. And I define our GitHub actions in accordance to this. So I'm doing a variety of steps here. If I wanted to take a look at how this integrates with Octopus Deploy, I can certainly utilize a series of what we have here, which are actions. So out of the box, we have integration with GitHub Actions. We also have a GitHub app as well that you can so choose to use. But what this allows you to do is basically do all the steps that I've shown you already, like create releases, do deployments, etc. These and other sorts of things you can certainly integrate. And this is also extended to other environments as well. You can do this with Azure DevOps. You can do this with Jenkins. You can do this with Circle CI, with TeamCity, with BuildKite, with a variety of other environments. If there's a CI process or server out there, chances are we've seen it, because all life springs from a CI process and then goes into a CD process. By the way, you may hear us talk a little bit about this, where CI is not CD. Try not to intermix the two patterns. They are extremely different. So going forward, you should keep that in mind. If you want to see integration with GitHub itself, you can do so by looking at the marketplace. By searching for Octopus Deploy, you'll see not only integrations through the GitHub app itself, which is here. You'll see our GitHub Actions, which are here. We have 11 or 12 now in the marketplace. You just pick these off and just utilize them as part of your integration. We also have integration with GitHub Copilot as well. So Octopus itself integrates with GitHub Copilot. And so you can use this extension for Copilot for querying your instances, your Octopus deploy instances, through an environment like VS Code, if you wish, and ask questions of, what is the status of the latest deployment, etc., if you're so inclined. So that is something that we also have available for you as well. Awesome. So just jumping back to my environment here, we've got a question here. I'll make sure that we get them answered. So I have a question that says, I have a question about package deployment step, please. How can I specify a static version number for a package that I'm deploying from an external feed? Great question. So jumping back into, let's take a look at, I've got my Octopus 101 here. We take a look at my project that I have defined, and we can take a look at our packages here. So we'll define our packages as part of a feed, and feeds you'll find as part of your infrastructure. Packages come from feeds, and you'll make them available as such, deploying as part of that. When you go to utilize packages as part of a deployment process, you can define a wildcard as part of this. So you can utilize that as part of a deployment process. So if we go ahead and say add a step here, so you can see we have our package deployment here. This is for a wide variety of packages here. So if we deploy a package here and adding a step, you can see that we can define here our version number here. Now, in some cases, you have to be explicit, but it really does depend on how you define these. It also depends on the location of which you're defining here. But here we can add an additional feed if we so wish, if we want to utilize those as part of them going forward. The package ID is typically the file name that you have defined as the package. So if you have foo.exe or foo.zip, the package ID will be that, and you will find that accordingly as part of those. In addition to that, you can reconcile packages when utilizing them as part of your repository. So if you take a look at feeds that are available, I don't have this set up here. We might have this set up in a different instance here. Let me just take a look if we do. So if we take a look at external feeds, okay, so I have some external feeds set up here. I can take a look at one of these feeds here. So I can see I have some feeds set up. I'm seeing that they're set up and good to go. So there we go. But when I do a qualification against one of these, you'll see the list of artifacts populate when you go through the process here. I just want to see if we have a process that's predefined with the package itself. We don't. That's okay. So what we'll do instead is we'll jump into the process editor. I don't have rights to edit this. Sorry, I don't have rights to edit this project. Again, that's RBAC controls, role-based access controls. We have RBAC enabled here. I don't have access to that, but you should see the package show up there accordingly when you have that. So sorry, I can't show you that quickly here, but that gives you an example of what that looks like. Awesome. All right, let's just jump back into my slides. I'll just round out, kind of highlight some of the things that we've talked about here. So you've seen a lot of examples here. I've showed you basically, how Octopus hangs together, what it looks like from the perspective of defining a deployment process, etc., and some of the terminology associated with that. So we talked about projects, talked about spaces, talked about deployment processes, talked about steps. these are other things and releases. These are other things you'll come to utilize as part of your deployment process. And once you're set up and good to go for your deployment process, things just happen like under the covers, and software magically just arrives to the deployment target, which is awesome. That's kind of the intention behind Octopus Deploy itself. I showed you also how to create a deployment process from scratch by adding steps. If there's a step that we don't have that's available to you, you can certainly find it as part of our community contributed steps. And then finally, I showed you how you might integrate this with GitHub Actions going forward. You can certainly use the app integration, or you can utilize Copilot if you're so inclined. There's lots of ways in which you can integrate through a variety of CI processes or servers, including Azure DevOps or TeamCity if you're utilizing those, and many others. So that's it for my slides. Just wanted to make sure that I get any other questions answered here that are coming up. I don't see any other questions, which is fine. Again, this is a bit of an experiment. We wanted to see if folks would be able to attend for different geos. It looks like it's been successful. We've had a number of folks who have attended, which is great. Just give me some time here to make sure there are any other questions that have been asked. Don't see any other questions, which is great. Well, this is great. This has been successful so far. We have 2 more versions of this webinar being hosted today, one for folks in Europe and another one for in North America. So if you happen to jump off, that's fine. Oh, we do have another question here. Sorry, I didn't get the answer as the network is going on and off. Where's the link to this video so I can revisit to review? Oh, great question. So I should have mentioned this earlier, but we are recording and publishing these to YouTube. So we are streaming live to YouTube. There will be a link off of our YouTube channel, which you will find. Let me bring this up here quickly. Sorry about this, just jumping a bunch of windows at once. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see that it's actually live right now. This is us. And you'll see a recording of this. We publish videos here all the time. You'll find this up on our YouTube channel. I'll give you the link here, which is this one, youtube.com/octopusdeploy. And you'll find a whole bunch of videos there. We publish twice, if not 3 times a week. We have a ton of content there, from internal product teams to external speakers. We recently just hosted a conference called Shipped. This is why you're seeing a lot of these videos here. But these and other sort of videos you'll find up on our website, which is there, and on the YouTube channel. So feel free to take a look at our YouTube channel. Again, this will also be sent out to you as a link through StreamYard after the fact. So feel free to check that out there. And since you're joining via LinkedIn, it will still be available for playback through our LinkedIn page, which is great. Awesome. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions. Thank you for your time and attention. Really appreciate it. Don't forget, we've got another 2 instances of Octopus 101 coming up later today, one for America and one for Europe. And if you happen to want to check out the 101 series next month, we run these every second Wednesday of the month. So we'll have one for January, then February, etc. But if I don't see you until then, happy holidays, happy New Year, and also happy deployments, everyone. So take care.